Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining the session by Service Design for Society India. The today's session is mainly covering the basics concepts of service design and what the value it brings to the social sector. I am Dr. Ravi Mahamuni will be explaining the what is the SDS India, why it came into existence, and how what are the activities we are planning under SDS India. And then we will try to understand what is service design. Then we will get into the social sector case study, that how this whole knowledge about service design is applied in practice. Then we will look into the what are the things are there, what are the challenges Indian NGOs are facing, and how we can use the service design knowledge to solve those challenges or to overcome those challenges. And then we will have a question and answer session, and then a conclusion. What we believe is that the much of the social impact is already happening in India. It's not that it's not happening. It's happening in a different pockets for a different set of people. So the idea here is that how we can bring the holistic view to the different problems what the NGOs are working on in a more holistic and systemic manner. The important thing here is that how we can enable people to do the things, because a lot of times the social sector activities are there where people is at the center, and we have to motivate them to work on different things. So I think through the different case studies, we will also understand that what it means and how it can be used. The important thing what we believe is that it can really help to the grassroots social workers and the organizations. When we are talking about the grassroots social workers, they are the people who are in touch with the different citizens for which social sector is working. And those are the people who are the eyes and ears of social sector. So how we can really enable them with the design knowledge so that they can do their job in a more innovative and impactful manner. So we started this SDS India organization on 26 January last month. We want to really bring India to the world landscape of service design through showcasing the social impact at scale. The important here is that not only talking about the what is service design, but we can really want to see the impact on ground. And I think India is the right place where there are a lot of challenges, there are a lot of complexities, and hence we thought that yes, I think we should have the organization like SDS India, which can help to uh, social sector to become more innovative, scalable, impactful, and replicable. And all these characteristics can come from the service design. But all this SDS India initiative is for whom? I think it is for all the people. For example, social sector volunteers, as well as their thought leaders, design professionals and the students, engineering professionals and students, because it's not only about designing the different touch points, but I think it needs to be realized on ground. It can provide them also opportunity to implement those design on ground so that it can really benefit to the different people. Also, it can be useful for the sociology, psychology professionals and the students, because whenever we are talking about service design, we need to talk to people, understand what the real problem they are facing. And there, these people, their knowledge can be very useful. But it's not that you need to be skillful or have those educational background, but anybody who is an enthusiastic and motivated individual who wants to really become a change maker. We will provide all the enablement so that you can become a change maker. And with this mission, we are offering such awareness sessions. We are bringing national as well as the international case studies where how the service design has brought change in a social sector. So the next case study which will be coming is about how service design has helped NGO, one of the NGO in London. That case study is coming soon, and we will be announcing that session very shortly. But the important thing is about knowing about service design, how it is being used, what the value it has brought for others. But what is it for our people? So first thing what we are trying to do is that we are bringing the different internship projects for the different students where we are helping them to identify the right problems and work on the real life problems what the NGOs are facing or our people are facing. So with this, we really want to democratize the service design knowledge so that not only designers are understanding it, but everybody who is interested to know about it will able to do it. Another important thing when we are talking about India, I think as we know, as Indians, it's very complex, correct? It's because of our diverse culture, economic and social structures. It really makes it challenging, not only companies to penetrate or innovate, but for the social sector also to become more innovative and impactful. So this is where we feel that the service design knowledge can be useful. So I think let's start with the first poll to understand that what is the current representation, that how many people are from the NGOs who are the volunteers, design students, and the design professionals, so that we can see the current mix.
I think about 24 out of 29 have voted. There are a few other people. Kindly identify yourself, so we'll close the poll then. You have the results, Ravi?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting that we have a mix of NGOs, volunteers, design students, and interestingly, a lot of design professionals have joined. I think this is a very good thing that we have such a mix result. So I think it's good. So the next thing what we want to see is about what is the current know-how about the service design, so that we can see that how the current knowledge is about the service design, and how at the end whether we are able to add to that knowledge. So if we can please attend this poll and give your choices so that we can see what is the current. Yeah, around 93% of the people have voted. So I think it's good that there are few people who are experts, as well as the people who don't know about service design, have heard about service design but not tried it. I think we have such more chunk. So we hope that um, this will really help. This session will really help to understand. So let's get into the session about the what is a service design, and it will be presented by Akanksha. Over to you, Akanksha.
Thank you, Ravi. Thank you for the introduction. So let me share my screen. So hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk to you about the basics of service design. I see that in the poll, actually, some people are do not know anything about it, know something about it, but haven't tried. So today I'm going to try to answer some key questions about what is service design, where do we use it, why should we use it, or even some ways how did we use it as service design in different projects. So before that, I would like to request you, if only you feel comfortable, you can turn on your cameras, because that's also a visual feedback for the person who's presenting. And if you just want to say hi in the chat, hi everyone, or and so on, so it feels a bit more interactive and not just one person talking. So that's a request as you feel comfortable. So going forward, first let me introduce myself. So I'm Akanksha. I'm currently working as a service designer at Tangity, which is a design studio of Entity Data in Milan, Italy. And I'm also one of the co-founders and digital strategist for my service design based startup, which is called Ibrida. Again, it's based here in Milan. But just like a lot of you in the call today, I did not know what service design was, say 3 to 4 years back. I graduated as an architect from USAP in New Delhi and worked for a couple of years until I decided to pursue my master's in product service system design from Politecnico di Milano, which is again in Italy, Milan. And to be honest, I joined the master's course and I still didn't know what service design really was. Now, I'm quite sure that a lot of you people here understand what is architecture, what is product design, because it's linked to a tangible space or object. But service design, not really. But before I go directly into that, let's take a step back. When I say the word service, what comes to your mind? Could you please write it in the chat? It could be whatever that comes to your mind. There is no right or wrong answer, but just be spontaneous. So do we have some answers, Ravi? Because I can't see the chat while I'm presenting. Some action or activity that is of value to someone else, something which facilitates the main function, intangible offerings, helping someone, a system, a process that offers solutions. Nice. I really like how we're trying to, basically what you're writing is already making a definition in itself. So some process that enables others to solve a problem, doing work for someone, or providing facilities, giving, to pay attention to design of delivery of a service. Nice. So I see that a lot of you actually touched upon what I'm going to say next. So that's really nice. So in my opinion, or in fact, Oxford Dictionary's opinion, a service is simply an act of helping or doing something for someone, as a lot of you wrote in the chat. And it's an intangible economic good. So it's not like a product, but it's an intangible, it has an intangible value. So let me tell you about some services that you experience in your everyday life. Maybe you never perceived them as services, or you never thought about how they were designed. That is why I picked up some examples from your everyday life. So when you wake up in the morning, you come across your Doodhwala or Akhbarwala They're bringing you a product like milk or newspaper to your doorstep as an act of service. Or perhaps fast forwarding in your day, you would probably take the public transport or a taxi to go to work. You're using a fairly tangible space like a train or a car, but the government or the taxi company is providing you with a service to take you from point A to B. Or fast forwarding during your lunch break, either your dabbawala is bringing you food or you're going to a restaurant to eat. While food is the product, the dabbawala and restaurants are providing the delivery service or the service of bringing you food on your table in a nice environment. Or even watching a movie or listening to music. So a song or a movie is a product, while this can be accessed through a service like Netflix or Spotify. So all of these are services. But the question remains, what is service design? First of all, I would like to establish that service design is nothing new. It's not a foreign concept that we must chase. And I hope through this presentation, you will realize it. So service design, by its definition, according to Don Norman, the father of user experience, is this. Service design is the activity of planning and organizing a business's resources, people's props and processes in order to directly improve the experience of the people, users or employees. So going back to the example of mobility services, let's use the example of an auto rickshaw. So as a service designer, when I'm designing something, I am thinking about, let's say, the props or the product. So in this case, the auto rickshaw itself, the people, so the person who wants to ride the auto rickshaw, but also the driver who's driving the auto rickshaw. So we already have like props and people, but what we also think about is the processes. So I'm also thinking about how this woman will actually call the auto rickshaw. Will it be physically or will it be digitally through an app? Or I'm also thinking about the experience. So when these people get into the auto rickshaw, how is the ride experience? And then eventually, how will she pay the auto rickshawala, and how, when she finishes her ride, when she moves on, how is the experience for both people involved? So all of these come together to provide a meaningful and memorable experience. I think there is no one definition of service design because everybody has their own interpretation. So when you Google it, you might find a lot of them. But for me, service design is a way of thinking. It's a skill set, it's tools, it's processes and methods to design systemic and holistic solutions. I know that you've probably heard these words systemic and holistic too many times, but it's true, and I hope you will realize it by the end of this presentation. So this was, let's say, a theoretical approach. Now let me tell you where can we use service design from my own experience. So I have used service design. I've developed a lot of service design projects. I'm going to take you through some very quickly. So service design could be applied to social innovation, policy making, entrepreneurship, and eventually, I think, anything and everything. So service design for social innovation. For example, this is a project that we did in Copenhagen with the Danish community, where we were trying to integrate the immigrants and the Danish community through a social space system, and we were using this metaphorical Lego blocks as to build these relationships. Then service design, again, for social innovation. Here, this project was developed for the municipality of Milan, where they were trying to involve young students as volunteers in exchange for some desired services, again, through communal spaces. So if you give me 2 hours of your time to volunteer for a communal place, you might receive something in exchange that would benefit you. Then service design for policy making. You might be surprised, but it's really, really becoming relevant in the public sector. And we presented actually two concepts, two citizen-centric models for the future of government 2030 with the European Commission. Then service design for social entrepreneurship. Like I mentioned before, that I'm also one of the co-founders of this startup called Hybrida. So Hybrida is actually a beer. Yes, it's a beer made with wasted bread. So what we are doing is we're leveraging on a network of bakeries who provide surplus bread and breweries who have advanced capacity to produce our beer. And this project is actually the brainchild of 4 service designers. And then, like I said, service design for anything or everything. So I've worked on projects from mobility, banking, energy, telecom. But what is the one thing that stays the same through all of this? It's the process. So how to service design? So the process that we ideally use is called something like this. It looks like something like this. So it's the process of a double diamond. So why are we saying double diamond? So as you can see, the first quadrant is saying diverge. What we do is we diverge when we have a problem, when we have the slight idea of the kind of thing that we're trying to develop a solution for. We diverge, we try to expand the problem, and eventually once we have those ideas, we converge to find the real problem. Then we diverge again and we converge again. So just, I get it, this could sound very confusing. So what I mean by this is, in the first phase, we'll discover what is the problem area. We'll try to define the problem area. We'll try to think about ideas, develop ideas, concepts, solutions, and eventually deliver a working solution. So like I said, you start with the problem, but you don't always know what the problem really is. So the first phase is just to identify the actual real problem. So we define it again, and then we move to a solution. So if I were to break it into another layer, it would be that in the beginning, we're empathizing. We're thinking about user interviews, we're involving people, we're doing research, we're going to the market to talk to some stakeholders. And then once we have those problems identified, we're ideating. So we're co-creating with the people who we think are relevant. We're doing some scenarios, we're using some user journeys, and eventually we're building a solution. But it's a solution that will be prototyped, it will be tested, it will be validated with the user. So in all of this process, you can develop whatever kind of project you have using this same process. And that's really one of the key values of this service design. So why do you think we should use service design? So understanding an entire service ecosystem, greater understanding of people and their experiences. As you understood that throughout the entire process, I was mentioning people again and again, because those are the people who will not only develop this service but experience this service. So it's very important that we keep them in mind. Learning the context in which service problems can occur, identifying opportunities to improve services or products, and in the end, co-creating with customers to learn, test, and improve this service experience. So the question is, okay, we understood what is service design, we understood how it's done, we understood also basic why service design, but why should you use service design? So this is a sum up of everything I've said before. So you should use service design to bring humans into the process to build empathy. So what we're talking about is a human-centered view. You should use service design to improve the experience by involving all stakeholders. So a fundamental thing here is co-creation. So when we're designing a project, we try to involve everybody, put them on the same table, and research with them, ideate with them, and validate our concepts with them. Visualize a service or a system as a sequence of related actions. So you will hear some words, maybe blueprints and user journeys, which basically means we're trying to imagine the journey of a person experiencing a problem or a solution and how he goes through the different stages of it. Communicating the service visually from different perspective. I mean, it's really important how we put things to paper, right? So whether you have an idea, whether you have a problem, once you start putting it on paper, it becomes real and you start seeing some connections that you were probably missing. So we use this a lot, whether it's storyboarding, scenario making, and so on. And then in the end, considering the entire service environment. So when you've mapped all of this, let's say on a big sheet of paper, you will start considering all the stakeholders, all the props, all the processes involved. And this will give you a holistic solution. So this is pretty much it. In the end, I would just like to leave you with let's say, some food for thought. So service design is a key enabler to humanize products and experiences and to create a better future for the stakeholders involved in the process. And I strongly believe that's the case. And I think you will really realize this in the next presentation by Saili, because she will take you through a real case study. And in case some of you who are design students or in general who want to know more about service design, these are some references that I put down. You can take a screenshot of this in case. And that's about it. Thank you so much. I guess, so if you have any questions, you can start putting them in the chat. Maybe you can start with the word question and write your question and put it in the chat, but we'll take all the questions at the end. So this was all from me. If you want to connect with me, here are my socials, and thank you so much. Over to Saili.
Thank you, Akansha. So I'll start sharing my screen. Let me know when you see it.
Yeah, we see it.
Yeah.
Okay. So hello, everyone. As you have already listened to Akansha's introduction to service design, I think my bit will help you understand how you can utilize this in actual NGO environments. So let's get started. Before that though, who am I? So I'm Saili. I usually introduce myself as a service designer, change strategist, and an illustrator. I have studied mechanical engineering from College of Engineering, Pune. So even I didn't know service design, as Akansha said, when I started my master's at Politecnico di Milano, but here we are though. My usual work week is divided into these three things. I work as a full-time service designer at a studio called Doing. Then I also work at Politecnico di Milano as a teaching assistant for first year semester students, where we introduce them to the world of service design. And on rest of my free time, I work with an NGO based in Amravati, my hometown, as a change strategist. So this is the last bit that we will be talking about today. Disha Foundation. Disha Foundation started 10 years ago with the sole aim of raising awareness about corneal blindness and how a proper care can help combat this issue. So when I approached them that I would like to work with them for my master's thesis, they were like, yes, we now are thinking of moving our focus to affordable eye care as a whole. So we would really like someone like you to research for us and let us know what are the possibilities we can explore. So the first design brief or design question, let's say, became, how might we help rural population combat blindness and get proper eye care? I joined this team around 3 or 3.5 years ago. And since then, we've been working together on this. This is the process we followed for Disha. We will go through it one by one, but you have to keep in mind that the process will change for each project and NGO based on the type of problem you're tackling. This process cycle for the project, or say projects, this is the process cycle that we used while working at Disha. The very first step is setting up the goal. The most important part for any NGO is having a clear vision. And since many NGOs are like, they are not started by one person, but a group of people who have kind of the same aim, it is very important that they all align on the overall vision and find this North Star, or called Dhruv Tara, to guide you through all the years of NGOs. With these North Star, you revisit all your goals, you prioritize them, make this list, and you make the list of plans you want to achieve, plans or goals you want to achieve in next 5 years. The next thing we did with this NGO was find people. You have to list down all the skills you want to have to achieve this goal, and then list down all the skills that your team already has and you would need in near future. And you create something called Circle of Circles, which is like, if I know someone who can help this NGO, you list it down, you contact them and try to see if they are able to help you in any way. The next and most important part for any NGO is planning the budget. Since it is not like corporate, you have to fundraise for whatever you are spending. You have to allocate the existing budget for all the projects that you are thinking of working on. You plan your fundraising campaigns and events based on the project you will be doing. The next point is listen. So this is where service design actually creeps into the whole system. Once the budget is clear, we move ahead with the research part. This is where we at Disha did the primary desk research into diseases that lead to blindness and reasons behind them, areas of improvement and awareness that we can tap into in upcoming initiatives through Disha. One of the main reasons for poor eye health was unavailability of the proper eye care centers or facilities and awareness of these conditions in the rural area. So we talked with experts and created this awareness program and launched it immediately. So what we did was, in the guise of this awareness program, we went to small towns, talked with people, tried to understand what are the current system, what can be improved, what are the current pain points. And then we came up with like the next step, which is coming up with solutions. So that's what we used for the next step. As I said, we did in-depth interviews from all the stakeholders like hospital staff, NGO staff, and since we were also working with corneal blindness, we also talked with organ and eye donors, their families and receivers. We did lot of quick surveys with doctors. Out of all the insights that we had gathered, we concluded that all the initiatives that can be done with Disha can be divided into two: prevention and care of most of the common eye conditions. So for the next point, we went to ideate. During ideation, what you do is you come up with we use lightning jam method, which is you create a lot of ideas in very small time. After you discuss these ideas, you mix them up with each other, create a new idea out of the existing ideas. You vote it out, you build them up into the final concepts, and then you prioritize these ideas based on whatever are your priorities for the plan, like 5-year plan. What we did for Disha was we came up with these ideas. The question, as you remember, was how might we help rural populations combat blindness and get proper care, which we then thought can be divided into prevention and cure. For prevention came ideas like mobile eye care unit or having a static eye hospital, whereas for cure it was eye donation awareness campaigns, pledge collections, corneal retrieval programs, and the eye banks. The next step is try. You create storyboards of your concepts. What this does is this makes whatever in the initial concept, you don't think each touch point or each interactions while creating the storyboard, or even while interacting or enacting the service, you come up with small points that you missed while creating the first concept. So this is what this is useful for. Then you also write a blog. This again helps you clear up the concept more. Once we had all the possible initiatives and priorities, we thought we would like to create a pilot of one of them. So for the sake of time and investment, at that time, the first initiative we went live with was the cure one. So since the NGO was already working in the area of creating awareness around corneal blindness, we decided to take it from there. And for our first pilot, we focused on eye donation awareness campaigns, pledge collections, retrieval programs, thanks to our partner hospitals. And this is what we did. Like, we enacted the services with the hospital staff and the NGO staff. We created a lot of paper prototypes of websites and leaflets and stuff. The next part is plan. Most important part, because many a times, like, having one project manager, as we all know, is very important. So someone to keep track of all the activities, people, time, and budget. You also important part of plan is setting up the KPIs. Like, how will you measure the success of your pilot or your launch service? This is very important to understand how successful your concept is, and if you need to change anything about this concept. Again, you need to revisit your budgets and reevaluate your fundraising plans. And this was something that I found really important. Like, during all this time, a lot of people are very active in the first ideation part, but during planning and actually doing the pilot, people lose their motivation because, like, it takes time to see results in these parts of the process. So you need to keep the motivations up. These are some of the templates. Then for the launch, you do a pilot first. Before launching the full service, start with the pilot. Keep tweaking the concept until you think it's at its best and this is the best response you can get for it. You scale if the outcomes are as you expected in the KPIs that we measured before, we defined before. You take it to the market. scale it into other activities, departments, or programs. This is again an important point on the launch part, like make the noise, create social media and website editorial plans, make some noise, and let people know about this new offering that you have. What we did for Disha at this point was we redesigned the whole website, all the collaterals like leaflets, thank you certificates, I pledge cards or organ pledge cards, the stickers for the organ and eye donation pledges, to include all our new initiative and processes. We put forward a proposal to our CM at that time, Mr. Fadnavis, for a 24/7 helpline number for eye and organ donation awareness, which was later approved. This was also launched the same day as our other touch points, and thus creating the holistic experience for the people in need. This was the website. These are some of the posters that we had designed and deployed in Amravati. So it's been 3 years now. We have been working together, me and this NGO. And from all the initiatives that we had slated out in the very start of the ideation, all of them are now live and getting a great response from people and sponsors alike. Throughout the process, I was really grateful for the time and trust the NGO put on me, especially the secretary, Mr. Gawande. Since I'm based in Milan, so it's really hard to be there every time, right? But yeah, we made this collaboration work, and I'm really happy about this. I took you all through the process, so you would see that it's not just the end results or end outcomes that are important, but it's the journey. So let's point it out. What are the tangible or evident outcomes of this whole process? So as Akansha already said, you have heard holistic a lot of time, but I'm going to use it once more. A holistic view of problems. What currently, like, the importance of problem-oriented thinking rather than the solution-oriented thinking is really important within the NGOs. And this is what they learn through this methodology. You don't start with a problem, but you don't start with a solution, but you start with a small problem that you want to solve and then go to the solution. End-to-end process redesign. So as I said, we redesigned the whole process for Disha. So how the front stage workers or staff works to the backstage staff works. So these are the people who you are in contact directly with, or who are working in the backstage, and you don't know what's happening behind. So how to make this whole thing work in harmony is what service design is good at, and I think will be important. Expansion plan for programs. So as I said, we started with 1, but now we have 6 other programs that this NGO is working on. Increase engagement rate on the social media and website. So the new editorial plan and many impromptu campaigns that we launch every other time. What are the tangible outcomes? But the most valuable for me are these outcomes. A structured way with using a design methodology within the NGO, and make them know the importance of problem-oriented thinking rather than the solution-oriented thinking, as I said before. How to test and fail faster so you can win sooner. Creating with people for people, and creating a continuous improvement mechanism. So what happens when NGOs are really old is that there are processes that are very ingrained into the culture, and changing them is really hard. So instead of changing it from the scratch, you have this continuous improvement mechanism in which you introduce change little by little and make the whole difference at the end. So that's it from me. I hope you all enjoyed listening to the project as much as I enjoyed working on it. If you have any questions regarding the project or what I do, ask in the chat. We will answer it afterwards, or drop me an email on this email address. I'd be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Aili, for wonderful session. So what we'll do now is that now you have heard about what is service design and how it can be used in one of the case study what you have explained. So that's good. So before we proceed, so I would like to, all of you, now you are aware about what is service design, as well as you have seen service design in action in one of the social sector project. I would like to understand from you at this moment, what are the places you feel like service design methodology can be used? So if you can start putting your comments in the chat box, that will be good. So request you to use the chat section where you can add your comments, where you feel like where it can be used. Yeah, you can take a few minutes. You have seen a lot of possibilities through the first two presentations. So it can be for your organization, whether it is the social organization or a business organization, or in general, the problems around us where you feel like, yes, I think this is the value it brings and this is where it can be used. Yeah, so a lot of interesting answers are coming. Good. So there are a lot of opportunities in improving government services, schools in education system, then annual procedures such as compliance, auditing, election can be modeled, business, public policies, solving big problems, transportation, clean drinking water. Good. Also, core development sectors like largely service-oriented, healthcare, educational, social welfare, citizen engagement with democracy, Aadhaar services, good, senior citizen care. Yeah. So policy making is a major opportunity, as Akanksha said. Would be good to know how her project at European Union. Good. So if you look at PSK services, of course, it is one of the great example in India that how service design can improve the government services. Also, if you remember how the Passport Seva Kendra was there 10 years back and now how it is. I think it's a drastic change. So it's not that the service design can be useful in businesses, but it can be useful and really make a difference in government services as well as the social sector. So that's good. So I think all are really, really interesting answers. So let's see that currently, okay. So when we talk about the act of kindness, because we are talking about the social sector, which is based on the volunteers, their effort, and all. So what it is like when we say it's nothing but the act of kindness. So when we are thinking about ourselves as a self-centric one, then we start thinking about that how I can help one person who is in need. So you can have an act of random kindness. Then there is something called as, from that you start helping a group of few people, which is in your connections or where you come across these people and you feel like helping them. From that, how to help to a larger society. I think we would like to actually move from self-centric approach to helping society at large scale. So it's not that it can happen in one step. So there are multiple steps involved in it. And that's where we feel that SDS India can enable to make it happen. Where whenever we get in touch with people, or I think if we do a self-reflection, we always feel like, yes, I think we would like to help others. So a lot of times it just becomes the wish or live. So how we can really fulfill that wish? There are a lot of organizations who are working, but how we can really bring that information to the people so that they can move from self-centered thing from left side to the right side by helping a large scale. So for that, what we feel is that I think it's very important because we are currently talking about the India context. I think it's very important to understand that what are the challenges are faced by the Indian NGOs. So request you to put down in chat section that from your perspective, what are the challenges are faced by the Indian NGOs? The people who have joined from outside India, they can actually put it from their perspective in their country, what type of challenges are generally faced by the NGOs, the people who are working in a social sector. So a lot of things are already connected when you have answered the previous thing. But here we can see that especially what are the challenges where we can really see that how we can be solved or we can overcome those challenges. You can take a few moments to think about it and then write it in the chat box. Yeah, it's good that it's allowing us to think. Yeah, so if you can start putting it into the chat box, that will be good.
Ravi, do you want me to read it out?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, let me do that. So I'll read one by one some of the challenges that people have written in this thing. First one is communication and low digital and technology enablement. Second is so technology and communication. Second is on building scale. A challenge is how do you take your work to larger numbers of people. Third one is accepting design as a need. That itself is being considered as a challenge. Meaning, I'm guessing the person says NGOs may not think of design as an integral part of what they do and how they do it. Then there's a question, what type of problems do NGOs face? But this doesn't seem to be indicating of the challenge, so I'll leave it there. Important point brought next one is lack of funds. Most
Interesting.
NGOs have lack of funds and have therefore there are no standard procedures and so on. Next one is keeping the motivation of volunteers at always a high level.
Correct.
Next
Yeah.
one is many NGOs are not well known. So they're small, they're local, they are sort of working in distant areas. So they're not particularly well known outside their circles. Next one is one challenge that organizations, NGOs face is when and how to involve the right people at the right time.
Interesting.
Again,
Yeah.
again, funds is identified as a challenge. Another very important point, lack of sufficient as well as capable human resources. And the need to manage those human resources like let's say some corporates do. Then there's another one which identifies a range of challenges faced, how to raise funding, which we've spoken about, how to attract good quality staff, again spoken about, how to retain good quality staff, how to measure impact of their work, how to know which services are most impactful for their communities,
Correct.
and most importantly, how to deliver those services efficiently and effectively.
Good.
Again, some more points around uncertainty of funding and therefore not having a clear runway about what they can do, how much they can roadmaps and so on. So there's a short-term vision that is affected because of uncertainty of funding. There's somebody who said gets the services from organizational level, improving the services, and big gap in connecting these two. Not sure, but maybe we'll figure it out. Language barrier, funding and community response. Donor organizations have very peculiar criteria for CSR donations. Yes, that's true. And oftentimes organizations have to therefore go by the way in which donors want them to do, rather than what they think is the right thing to be done. So this is a constant problem. Sometimes grant due diligence process is time consuming and takes a lot of effort. Yes, very true. Collaboration with other NGOs, absolutely important. There's not enough collaboration because everybody is probably competing for the same set of people, the same kind of resources, same kind of funds. There is very little support for process improvement in NGOs. So most of the funds are not, most of the funds are available only for end use, but not enough financial support for improving the organizational process. Another challenge I written is finding volunteers, data collection. There are certain sectors where CSR donations are not being made, such as, for example, elder care.
Correct.
They don't necessarily attract. So what happens is, if you look all the things, some sectors get a lot of financial support, particularly from CSR. Things like, for example, healthcare and education can get a lot of CSR funding, but there may be other things where there is not enough funding support. Similarly, the co-creation with community rather than taking a top-down approach. What does the community really want? And this is not an uncommon thing where, we go in with the solution first approach, like what I think Saili was thinking. We think we know what the problem is, and therefore we go in with the solution and don't necessarily verify whether the problem has been fully understood. And co-creation is possibly a very good opportunity, and that is something to talk about. Getting government approvals, often time consuming, yes, particularly if you're looking for government projects. Imbibing NGO vision and mission amongst the volunteers. Non-profit nature makes NGOs not want to streamline processes. So चलता है kind of thing. ठीक है, हो रहा है ना, करने दो. If it's working, let's not tinker with that. Let's keep doing that and so on. And again, a few other examples where uh, um, attention might be helpful. Performing arts, heritage is also another area to be taken as challenge for service design. So I think we've got a fair
Yeah.
range of challenges suggested, Ravi.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. So we have got really diverse views and very peculiar problems. I think thanks all participants for pinning it down. So it's good. So from the literature, so when we try to look into the what really research is talking about. So what are the challenges are faced by the Indian NGOs? And I think it is really resonating with what the collective knowledge we just saw here. So they are also an important thing I think people were talking about. So the important thing what they have identified is the lack of credibility, and because of that, there are the subsequent issues about the funding and all other things are coming. So how we can really build that credibility? Yes, I think this is the NGO really doing a good job. This is what the impact. So how we can really do that. Another point was about the absence of strategic planning and development approaches. I think that also came out where a lot of times we have that short-sightedness that what is coming in maybe next quarter or the next year, but we are not really looking at the long term, how we can do that. Poor governance and networking. I think the NGO networking problem also came. And also what happens is that regarding the poor governance, which is also one of the important challenges faced by, because a lot of times it is the volunteers who are driving those NGOs, and if we don't have a full-time people working on it, that becomes a little bit difficult to govern the overall thing. So I think those are also challenges which needs to be addressed. Another thing is that the lack of volunteerism as well as the social work among youth. So though it says youth, I think it's in general is that how we can really motivate volunteers to take this part. As I was talking about the different types of kindness. So, but if you ask that individual person in person, he or she will say, yes, I want to do something. But that motivation converting into the action, I think that is where somewhere there are missing links which needs to be looked at. Another point also I think we talked about is about the getting the right people on board at right time is also very important, and also getting the support from a different people, in whether it is in terms of the expert knowledge or whether it is in terms of the legal or finances. I think those type of things are also is very important. Another thing we talked about the lack of funds. So I have combined the lack of funds with the misuse of funds. I think these two things goes together. It's also about what the impression people are having about the different NGOs, that whether they are really using the funding for the right purpose in a right manner. Are there different controls are in place? I think that is also very important, that it's not about having those things in place, okay, but are they evidenced out where people are able to get that impression? Yes, I think these people have all the controls are in place, the money is getting used for right place. A lot of times NGOs don't put effort in doing that or externalizing those things or evidencing those things in a manner so that it's very easy for consumption for the normal people, and they see that yes, money is getting used for right purpose, how it can be used, so that the lack of funds type of things can be. Another important aspect, I think there was one point also what Chaitanya sir is talked about, is about the getting approvals from government bodies and other things. It's also not only the approvals, but nowadays I think you might have seen that there are lot of things are happening where NGOs are under government scanner, and that is also is one of the challenges faced by the Indian NGOs, and this is what the people are talking about. I think where if you look at all these challenges, at least not all, but I think there are few things where we can definitely see that by putting the right policies, in place, right processes in place, as well as having a different touch points, whether it is like a technology touch point like the mobile app or the website, or the human touch point where the volunteers or the people are in face and they are talking, as well as the type of the other networking what you are using, how we can do that, and these challenges can be overcome by those things. And that's where we feel that the service design which can really bring the value, because that's where it will. But I think another important thing where I would like to bring to your notice is about there are multiple stakeholders in NGO. Lot of times if you look at here, we have covered few of them through the challenges. But if you look at, it starts with the founder. He or she has something in mind that yes, we want to do this. Okay. And this is the some vision. Maybe it might be the one liner or the two-liner vision, and with that vision or with that motivation, I think they start thinking that yes, I think we need to do something and how we can do that. But a lot of times what happens is that the founders and the NGO become the synonym to each other, and that's where the problem starts. But if you look at, I think we need to learn from the companies, the way finances are managed in the profit and loss and PLN statement, is that the company as an entity is considered different than the owners are, and both are the different entities. That's how I think same principle I think we need to see here also, that NGO is a different entity and the founders are different entities, and how the different concerns and constraints of founders are also considered when we are designing. I think that is very important, because we are talking about the scaling up the NGOs and the different things. But when we are scaling up, I think we need to also see that the soul of that NGO, with the vision it has started, I think should not get diluted in this process. I think we are also saw that one of the challenge when it came out from maybe one of you is about NGO starts doing what the funding agencies want. And that's where now the founders or the NGO's vision start get diluted. How we can really do that and avoid those things and be on track. While doing that, the role of the permanent staff, which is on that NGO, is also very important. What are their concerns and constraints? Because NGO invest in them, not only in terms of financial, but making them aware, aligning their thought process with the NGO's vision. I think a lot of investment happens in a multiple way. How we can really address their concerns and constraints so that they stay with the NGOs with a long-term perspective, with whatever the adequate finances they are getting from NGO. That is very critical. Apart from that, the supporters who are providing the not only the financial support, but the knowledge support and the other things, how we can really understand their concerns and constraints. Okay. But while doing that, how we can really balance all those things is very important. And of course, we talked about the challenges of volunteers. I think that is also very critical. I think in the subsequent slide also we'll talk about it. And another is the government bodies. That is also. So if you look at, unless we try to balance the challenges and the concerns and the constraint of all the different stakeholders, these are just the representative one. I think the whole thing will not go in a right direction. To go in that right direction, I think first we need to realize that yes, there are multiple stakeholders and we need to be aware about these things, so that we, while designing the interventions, will take care of those things. So if you look at, I think the holistic things we have talked about it multiple times, which is very important. Okay, this story of elephant and the different parts, we have heard it n number of times. But if we use only one here, the touch perception, if you use, then you are looking at the different parts, and that may give a different, like, misjudged elephant in this case. And that's how they misjudge the problem which we are trying to solve for the social sector. And this is very critical, that how we can really look at holistically by different lenses. Not only in this case the touch perception, but we need to use the different perception. And that's where the service design can help you by providing the multiple lenses through which you can look at the problem in a holistic way, so that you will not be like this troubled elephant. Who am I? Am I a wall? Am I a rope? Or am I a fan? Correct. So what I am. So those type of things will not. Lot of times, actually, what happens is that we try to solve the small problem, and then so I think we talk about in the system theory is about the local maxima and global minima. A lot of times it happens in that fashion, and how we can really avoid it. So this is nothing but the holistic. So there are multiple principles of service design thinking. I know Akanksha has talked about, Saili has talked about, but I think let me emphasize on those things. The holistic thing we talked about is very critical to understand the problem holistically, okay, and try to solve it so that we are really solved. Another thing is that the human centeredness. It's not only the user centeredness. I think we have seen that there are multiple stakeholders where different human beings are involved. I think we need to take care of all those things, and not only the user centered where we are talking about the people. Of course, we are in a social sector, we are working for the people. They are the prime. But while doing that, unless we address the concerns and constraints of other stakeholders, I think the interventions will not go smoothly, or they will not be accepted frictionless. The co-creativity, I think we have talked about this also, that how we can, not only the designer, but how we can involve these different stakeholders, not only the different stakeholders which was listed on the previous slide, but the designers, the volunteers, the other, and it's not only the stakeholders, but the multidisciplinary people also, how we can involve them and do a co-creation of the different values. And the sequencing, the idea here is about, we are talking about the holistic, but while doing that, how we can look at the journey. Okay, so when we are looking at the problem of volunteers, it's not only like how I can attract. So it starts with how I can attract the volunteers, how I can onboard the volunteers, how I can enable them to their task so that they get engaged with this NGO for a long period of time. Also, how I can give them the visibility, how I can give them the sense of fulfillment, and like that, and how I can give an opportunity for them to become an advocate of what the things they are doing. So I think we need to really look at it as a journey, as a sequence of different steps together. I think that is also very important, and this is also one of the important principle of the service design. And the evidencing, that's what we also talked about on the previous slide, because experience is intangible, correct? Unless we evidence it out, unless we showcase it, unless we express it in a tangible way, which is consumable by different stakeholders, I think it becomes a problem. So I think these are the 5 important principles of service design, which helps to design interventions and make the impact, the intended impact, or what the values we are talking about, that service design is good, it helps you do that. But if we don't follow the rigor of the process, which we talked about, a double diamond, the divergence and the convergence, then it will not happen. It should not be just the tick mark that I followed the step, but the rigor behind those things needs to be followed while doing that. Okay, so that's where we have talked about the double diamond framework, or discover, define, develop. So in the discover, how we can really get into the problem from a different perspective and have a look into those things. And then they define the problem, which is the right problem. Lot of times, I think there is a one question in the chat box, is that I get the problem which is already defined. It's always start with that. If we think a design brief, there is some reason for which the organization is reaching out to the designers, or they are trying to solve those things. So it starts with some problem. But when we discover through the user research that, okay, these are the real problems are faced by the different stakeholders, there is a friction, there is a contradiction, there are different viewpoints, and then how we can navigate through those things. And that can help in defining that problem. Okay, so depending how that concrete problem is, but I think we need to see that in the discover phase, can we really revalidate those things and look at from different lenses before we try to come up with the ideas and implement it. Because having the great solution for the wrong problem is anyway not going to be useful. So we need to really find the right problems to solve it and how we can do that, and develop the different ideas and the prototypes, try it out, and then they deliver it so that we can really take it to the people. Another important thing is the co-creation. I think we talked about. Another important thing is that when we are talking about the service design, as I was saying, to solve all the challenges what the NGOs are facing, I think we need sometimes maybe policy changes needed, some process changes, different touch points, interactions, and all those things are required to have a positive and the systemic impact. And that's where service design really helps to bring out those type of things as part of the intervention specification when they go through the process. Another important thing which I talked about, the journey perspective is very important, and not look it from a transactional manner. That's where the service design can bring the value. If we focus only on the transactional thing, then this methodology is not for you or not appropriate for that problem. I think we really need to look at holistically if we really wants to get maximum out of this methodology. Yeah. So if we look at the problem, though the at the abstract level problems look the same. So if you look at this, the volunteer problem we talked about, but I think we need to understand that every problem is different in that context. Though we might start with a generic problem that, okay, there is a onboarding of volunteering is the problem. But if you start looking at it differently, so if you want to have a volunteers for a tree plantation activity, okay, it's like a one-off activity, no commitment required from those volunteers, okay, and there is a no less motivation required to attract actually, because it's a one-off. They know that, okay, it's not a long-term relationship, it's very transactional. But if you look at also from an onboarding perspective, to onboard that person and enable that person to do a tree plantation, the investment required from a NGO is very minimal, okay, and the time and effort they have to spend in doing that is minimum. They have to spend more time in attracting them, but the less time in onboarding them. But if you look at the next one, where you want volunteers as an advocate for a rainwater harvesting, where you want those volunteers to go out and reach out to the different societies in urban areas, as well as at the villages, and then encourage them to do rainwater harvesting, to make them enable or make them do these things. I think there is a lot of investment comes from the NGO side, because I think you need to help them to be part of the greater vision what you are looking at it. Also, there has to be commitment from heart to soul, because you need to spend long time, because you need to first understand yourself that what is rainwater harvesting, what are the different techniques in what different situations. Otherwise, you will not able to do the job in a right manner. And you need to be self-motivated. So if you look at these two volunteers related problems, I think the different types of attracting people, different types of onboarding and sustaining is required. And that's where I think we need to look at the problem in a very contextual fashion. And that's where that discover phase really helps to understand what exactly the problem, so that we can come up with the design intervention. So whatever the things you are now hearing in today's session is about nothing but the different knowledge element. What is the service? What is service design? What are the different challenges? How it can be done? So if we look at these 3 steps, which is coming from the Buddhism, which is like 500 BC old, still they are relevant. So what it says is about the Shrutmaya, where it's like a received wisdom. The way now today you are getting the received wisdom from the different people at the intellectual level, now it is increasing your awareness about the service design. I think that is good. It's nothing but the received wisdom. Then the next step is that the Chintanmaya Panya, where you start intellectually understanding and discussing about. Might be you, after this session, you might go back, you start thinking about it. You might start discussing with your colleagues and friends and families that how it can be. So you started engaging into this thing. So it is nothing but the intellectual understanding, which is now from awareness, you have moved into the engagement phase where. But the most important thing is the last one, is the Bhavnamaya Panya. What it means is that the wisdom that develops within oneself, that is nothing but the experiential wisdom. And the experiential wisdom comes when you apply the knowledge in practice. So just knowing about this at the intellectual level, that yeah, service design is good, it is really helpful and all, it's of no use unless you apply it in practice. Okay, for the some scoped problem or the larger problem, I mean, unless you apply, you will not really experience it yourself. Because whatever you have heard, what the Saili talked about or the Akanksha talked about, the value is for them, the NGOs where it is being used, it's not for us. How we can believe that? Yes, I think it has motivated us to apply in our context, but I think we need to do that. And that's where, to give you this Bhavnamay Panya, that is the experiential knowledge, we are at SDS India enabling this NGO to work with the designers and allowing designers to work with NGOs on a real life problem, so that both of them get this experiential value through that. So currently we have identified the two projects. One is the Tahan. Lot of you have already volunteered for these things. So for more details, you can visit our website. Another problem currently we are working on is a Bookwala, where also if you look at the high level, there are problems about the volunteering, onboarding, and those type of things. I think this is also where we are trying to give. So these are the, there are 5 problems which we are started working, and now it will go in full-fledged from the tomorrow. For next 3 months, we are scoping down, and this is like an experimentation where we are also seeing that what are the different new processes and the thing needs to be in place. And this is the first time, not the full-time designers will be working, but on the volunteering based model, how we can really bring value. And this can really help us to motivate different NGOs also to see the value. We are also open to hear from the different NGOs what the problem they are facing, and also float it and attract the volunteers to work on those problems. Okay. So as now coming together is a beginning. We started last month. We have got the great response. Around 800 plus people have connected with us, and we are now making a progress on this path. I think after that, the working together as the different designers and
पोलिसांचा वृद्ध वाटतं.
so
सदरक्षण आयोग
request
झालं.
everybody to mute. I can see the few noises coming up. So we are getting into the discussion now. So where I request all of you to put the questions in chat box, where we can start discussing about those questions. So I request Akanksha as well as Chaitanya sir also to come on video, and Saili, please, and unmute yourself.
To start with, we have our first question, Ravi.
Yes.
Maybe would you like to take it?
Okay, sure.
So the question is, Steve says, what if the provider defines the problem? As in, we are not defining the problem. Someone is giving you a defined problem. So do the beginning changes, like the
Correct.
approach? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So actually, I try to answer that in one of the things is that I agree. A lot of times it happens that how mature that design brief is, but I think that should not bias our discover phase. Okay. I think that looking at the problem from multiple lenses is very critical. It might not change that problem, but it can add the granular levels of details around that problem to when we are ideating it, that time it really helps. So depending on the context, how mature that the problem is, I think we can shorten the discover phase, but I think we need to triangulate it with the different ways to see that how we can look into the problem and whether there is a need to redefine that problem.
I would also add a little to Ravi's answer.
Yeah,
like
please.
it, as designers, it's also our job to make sure that we start at a correct point and convincing your client that this is something that you should be doing, or yeah, but just in a subtle way. Don't be rude about it. That's it.
Yeah, agree, Saili. So that to do that, when we are looking at the problems, we are bringing lot of subtle information on table so that they themselves realize that, yes, I think this is the problem needs to be holistically looked at. Yeah, thanks, Sai.
Correct, correct. The holistic approach is the one that conveys a lot of things. We have our next question. It says, let's say an NGO has figured out some 10-15 problems, and while solving them, what are the key things that one should keep in mind while solving a problem?
Okay, Chaitanya sir, you want to take this?
Sorry, would you mind repeating the question, please?
Yeah, so the question is, let's say an NGO has figured out 10-15 problems. So what should be the key, what should they keep in mind while solving them is the question.
Or also, just to add to that, how to prioritize which problems to pick up first.
Okay. This is a fairly broad question. So, I mean, so in that sense, it needs to be a little bit contextualized as to what category of problems are we really talking about? Is it internal? Is it external? Is it about service? What is it? So, once you know what your most important stumbling block is, then it may become a little bit more important to find out what are the things to focus on. Now, if, for example, if we said that funding is my key problem, then one can go a little bit deeper and understand what are the kind of issues and what can I do differently to improve the quality of funding or access or whatever. But one important thing to know, I believe, is that when we are talking about design, applying design into our work, I think it's important to pick problems over which we have significant control on solving. For example, funding may not necessarily be a good problem to solve because funding is about between the funder and the funding and the NGO or whatever. The solution or the problem does not lie in one space alone. However, if you're looking at applying a set of prioritizing, it's better to probably start in those areas of my work where I have significant control, because I don't have to depend on anybody else and so on. And I think that is where the possibility of maximum leverage is available in those areas. So I would think that one of the ways to pick areas of problems to solve is see how much control do I have on solving that, and then decide to pick them up.
Yeah. So I think it's a very interesting problem. Just to add to what you have said. So what I feel is that when there are multiple problems and how we can. So I think if we can look at from a journey perspective, that from its vision to realization, what is the journey of that organization? What are the different steps are involved? And to deliver that vision, what are the stumbling blocks are there, what the challenges are at different phase, and what is the thing which is really abstracting you to reach to your vision or realize that vision. Okay, and also whether that problem is in your control or not. Another thing is that we have to also look at that if you look at that multiple stakeholders I talked about, how we can really, how easy it is. Another thing is that the picking up the things which can really understanding the dependency, so that if the way we were talking about the evidencing, so if I start evidencing that we are appropriately using funding for the given vision, if we can start evidencing it, that may help you to solve some part of the funding problem, because now you have something to do that. So like that, if you can start with a different dependency, look at your journey as an NGO in delivering the vision, and then see that, I think that also really help you to prioritize and see that which problem to solve in which sequence, which can really help. Instead of solving all together, I think then it becomes very difficult, because you might not have.
Just to give in the example of Disha again, like if you saw, we had a lot of problems and a lot of solutions, right? After ideation, but we chose to work on the organ eye donation part because that was our donation awareness part, because that was where we could do the most with least resistance, and we had all the available resources for that. So in that way, we prioritize that initiative and then the other ones.
Also, another aspect for that would be time. So I think you should also understand what kind of time frame do you have available to solve that problem. What kind of solution are you looking for? Is it a short term solution? Is it like for a long term solution? So the time frame plays a very important role in how you will pick your problem, and how the kind of process also, and the kind of people you will involve. It will radically change depending on what time frame you're looking for.
Correct. And just to add the last one, what are the resources are available with you? That is also very important. Yeah. Yes, Mayur, let's go to the
So
next.
basically, whatever solutions that we got from here boils down to the principles of the service design, like being holistic and everything else. This is not a question. It is like people are interested in knowing Akanksha's business work regarding Hybrida. So they want to know how the business works and how service design is helping you in growing.
Okay. So so basically Hybrida is it's a bread beer essentially. So the main aspect of the business for Hybrida is the fact that we know that a lot of bakeries in Milan waste a lot of bread. So we knew that there is a market where this bread is going to go to waste. We also knew that there are breweries with over capacity. So they have their certain produce, like they produce their beers, but then their machines are empty for other part of the year. So we found these two opportunity spaces, that if we could use this wasted bread, if we could use this over capacity of the brewery, can we develop a product which will be sustainable, which will promote circularity of resources. So that's where, let's say, we position Hybrida. And through the years, like it's now been almost 2 years that it's been going on, and through the years we also found another aspect to the project. So it really started as a sustainable and circular product, but then we also found out that we could involve certain neighborhoods in the city. So for example, now Hybrida has become Hybrida for neighborhoods. So as we develop the project, like now we produce 3 beers, so those 3 beers are dedicated to one growing area in Milan. So for example, the first one was like this Hybrida for Bovisa, which is a neighborhood in Milan. But the idea was that we were involving the bakeries in that neighborhood, the brewery in that neighborhood, the people in that neighborhood. So what happened is that Hybrida transitioned from just a beer to a social aggregator. So we changed our path from just being a product on the shelf to being somebody who's connecting different communities, connecting different stakeholders. So this is how, let's say, this is how service design actually helped us, because it was a project that we started in the university when I was still at Politecnico di Milano, and we were all service designers. And the brief was that we need to come up with a startup idea considering sustainability. So we started with that, but as I mentioned, we scaled, we changed completely our direction, and now we see ourselves in a different space. And this actually is one of the strongest, let's say, skills of a service designer, to connect the right people, to connect the right stakeholders, and to find value in that. If did I answer your question?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, we have next question from Chaitanya sir. Like, are there any techniques for detecting service smells? So smells as in the service failure point or something like that, which are undetectable and maybe we need to give some attention to it. So,
Yeah.
Saili, would you like to take it?
Sure. Honestly, I don't understand it fully. Service smell is something that I heard for the first time.
So Sally, let me start and then you can build on it. So generally what happens is that as we say in any service, there are service failure points, correct? So how we can really identify those service failure points and try to address those things. Okay. So I think when we are talking about any part of this discovery phase, we try to understand what is the service failure points and design the service recovery mechanisms for those things. Okay. It's impossible to identify all the service failure points, but at least if we can in a focused manner deliberate on those things, that okay, what are the different points where there are chances of failure, and design the service recovery mechanisms for that, it helps. And that is also one of the important aspects as part of the service design, which can be useful here. But yeah, so Chaitanya sir, if you want to add
Yeah.
to this question, and
Yeah, the background to, or the context behind asking this question is like this. When you enter into a running organization as a service designer, or anybody for that matter, and you say, okay, I am a service designer, how can I help you? Okay, it's a different thing than talking to a startup or an early stage organization or something like that. Here things are running, and when you ask this to that organization, the answer may not be very immediately, the answer may not come out very easily, number one. Second is, so how do we help organizations know or find out, do I have a set of problems?
correct.
Is there something that I have not been able to pay attention to simply because, so typically, for example, when we say service failure, we will know when the failure has occurred. Until that service has not failed, that until that failure has not occurred, I may not know. I may think that the service is going okay. Okay, so which is what I'm asking is there a way, for example, for an organization? I will give a couple of examples where this happened in one of the organizations I used to work for before. There is something, what this is again related to what Ravina had mentioned in one of her points earlier, that chalta hai, kaam chal raha hai na, it is okay, things are working, don't bother too much, kind of stuff. The reason is we are not always having enough time on our hands to focus on all the things that are going on. So we have to keep things running. And this is true whether it's you're working for a non-profit or a for-profit or whatever it is. But there are certain key things that if we don't pay attention to, start affecting our efficiency, and therefore start slowing us down. Therefore, it means doing the same thing costs more money. Therefore, it means that we are making less money from the same thing, and so on and so forth. Okay. So when we started initially looking at why are we in the organization, when we were seeing that why is this not happening, we started using some of the techniques from Six Sigma process improvement and all that. We realized that a lot of our process efficiencies were all over the place. The SLAs were there on paper, but nothing really was happening on the ground. So intent was there that we should have SLA, but the implementation was not able to match up. Again, the intention was not able to, the action was not able to match up not because of lack of intent, but not knowing how to do it.
Yes.
Or how to do it better.
Correct.
So those were cases that we had to, until we had to started paying attention there, we did not, we said, "Okay, chal raha hai na, it's okay." So that's what I was actually talking about. Is there a way for people to understand?
Yeah. So there are two types actually. One thing is that how we can, when you are suppose reimagining the service or designing the new services, how we can, in your capacity, what are the service failure points you can identify and have a recovery mechanism. That is the one part. Second part is that which is related to actually stitching time saves 9. In a sense is that currently in one of our project which is related to airport, Okay, airport airlines related thing. So there in the discovery phase, we look at the organizational data and do analysis and see that, okay, what are the different trends are happening. Also, we look at the social, using the social media analytics, that what are the people are talking about on a social media, though they have officially not launched the complaint. But these are the early trends which are really leading to the larger failure after some time. So how we can identify those early trends using the different technology and present them in front of the decision maker, saying that, okay, these are the things. And that's where actually in the discovery phase, when we are looking at not only the talking to the users, but how they are expressing themselves on the social media, how they are not only limiting to the feedback they are giving on the official channel. So like that, and as well as what the data, as you talked about the different SLAs, but when we look at the data in the system, how we can extract it and connect that data, because a lot of times the data is in discrete fashion. How we can connect them in a journey and see that, okay, these are the friction points, might not be failure at this moment, but these are the friction points, these are the tension points, these are the trends which is might lead to those things. And it's better that we act on it now before it becomes. And that's where actually we started showing those things to the people, that this is the murmur is happening before it becomes the larger problem. I think we need to be addressed. I think those type of things help. So it needs to be addressed. One is the proactively, while reimagination, and the again proactively in the running system also, before it gets into the out of hand. I think that's how I would
Okay.
say.
So if I understand now, I think I have a pretty clear idea. I'll answer from my perspective. So the first one is, when you do understand what are this, let's say, failure points at the first time when you started the project. I think there, the most, what I would do is, as Ravi said, the social listening. So what are people talking? What are the uh, what are the points that people are liking about this brand or this service? What are the points that people do not like about this brand and this service? So what this helps you is have this emotional map. You map it on a user journey. You try to understand what are the critical points, so the lowest emotional uh, scale on this map, and you try to understand like what can go wrong, the worst possible experience, the best possible experience. So what the worst possible experience will do is it will give you the points where your service needs to work on. So what is the recovery mechanism, as you guys put in. The second part, like when you are designing a new service altogether, maybe this is being a mechanical engineer. Like when I was doing my bachelor, we were working on this Baha car, so all-terrain vehicle car, when I was in mechanical engineering. And there, what we used to do was, we used to, for every design, we would have this design for failure card. There, we would list down all the possible failures for the design part and how that can be solved. Or what are the situations that will make this failure happen, how we can solve it by redesigning the product, and how we can solve it if we don't redesign the product, but as a last minute fix. So whenever I do a design a service, I create this kind of matrix for each of those points. Yeah, I think that's my answer. I hope it.
I just want to add one line here, is that also it is important that when we are designing the interventions, put these eyes and ear in the design intervention itself, so that it can start collecting the data which can give us the early trends for the future problems. I think those sensors also needs to be introduced when we are designing the intervention, so that we can get a continuous basis the different data which can be used. Yeah. So
And another perspective that we, let's say, did not mention is when these fires start within the organization. I mean, we talked about if the service is being provided to an external client, but what if you're talking about your organizational dimension itself? So how your organization is running, and maybe there are the operative people who are really into the mix, like who are dealing with it firsthand, and then there is probably the bosses, the founders, and so on. The difference in their understanding of the problems, the difference in their foresight of the problems, is something that's very critical. And I think that's where service design can help, because we don't consider, we don't prioritize on a stakeholder. For me, if I'm designing something for for a company, for an organization, the person who's an intern, who's on the junior most level, who is the most operative, is as insightful as the boss, probably, because he has a vision, but the person who's interacting with it daily has a completely different understanding of the problem. So what he can contribute to the table is also important. So I feel like, so certain times that we're designing something for, let's say, you as an organization or you as an NGO are designing something, you need to also talk to the on-field volunteer. How has his experience been? Maybe he has already started noticing some trends, some problems that would affect you in the future, but you, let's say, on the other side of the table, have been missing it. So I think that's also very important.
Correct. So how we can enable those volunteers to voice their concerns or what the observations they are, which goes into the right decision making process. Yeah. Yes, Mayur, we can have a next question.
We don't have more questions. I would request everyone to post their questions and queries in the chat.
Yeah. So I have got one question actually, which what they are saying is that the how SDS India attract volunteers. I think it's very interesting question. I think it might have came because I think Akanksha and Saili have joined from Milan, and they are also our part of our core team, SDS India core team. I think I am really happy to inform you that, as I was saying, everybody feels that we want to contribute back to the society, and everybody is looking for the different means and the channels to do that. So because of this, we can say digital revolution and all. So wherever you are, actually around, if I look at 25% of the volunteers who have connected with us, they are gone out of India to learn design. They are working in different parts of world, has connected with us as part of the SDSR and wants to contribute to the SDS India. So it's like the, if you have motivation and how we can enable them to happen. I think that is also very important thing, that how we can really um, enable all the people, irrespective of the boundaries of the countries, wherever we feel like we want to contribute, and make that happen in a way so that it really helps to the people who really needs it most. I think that's how it is. And Akanksha and Saili are the currently the best example here, where location doesn't matter when you have a intent to contribute. So thanks Akanksha and Saili for joining SDS India. So I think looking at the time, I would like to request Chaitanya sir to conclude the today's session about the how, from your perspective, because you are working with different NGOs for so many years, from your perspective, that how we should take this further.
Yeah, I do believe that service sector in India itself is huge, as you know, and there are large and small players in this service ecosystem in India. And if we are really looking at improving the quality of life and well-being of people and so on, we really have to start looking very carefully about how organizations who are working in human development can leverage the benefits of progress on some of these fronts. And I therefore believe that service design has a very important role to play, not only and across, literally across the development canvas, if you will, from governments, central governments, down to state governments, down to local governments. There's a lot of possibilities that we should do, and I therefore want to congratulate SDSI for having come into this come into its avatar now to sort of try and bring the progress of service design and service design thinking into human development. I also have seen it actually in practice almost 5-6 years back in an organization that I was working, and it did make some things very helpful for us It reduced friction in our processes. It improved the understanding of the people involved. Why certain things are done in a certain way, you can send that out as a process definition, or as a saying, this has to be done like this. But what happens when you don't do it in a certain way? Why is it to be done in a certain way and all that? When the people on the ground, when the people are actually doing it, come to know, they are able to understand nuances much better, and therefore they are able to contribute to the improvement of the service also. I think somebody mentioned this point that, I think it was Saili who mentioned that you may be at one end of the table, or was it Akanksha? I don't remember. But anyway, the point is that the people who are on the ground and doing things, and those who are managing the organization, building things, or working at macro levels, there is a need to connect there. And I think this is a good way to do it. Third thing that is there is that in any service, one of the fundamental thing is the quality of the service leaves a lasting impact on the service consumer of that service. And in my experience, and I think this is true for all of us remember a bad service for much longer than a good service. And we are more prone to talk about a bad service to others before saying this is a good thing, because we have been personally affected by that. And therefore it is very important that organizations working in this space need to pay attention to that. And lastly, for example, is if for any organization which is actually into delivery of service, their bottom line directly is affected by how well that service is delivered. So if I do something poorly, it means I take more time to do it. I need more effort to do it. I need more resources to do it, which impacts my bottom line directly. There is no direct, there is nothing else but a direct impact on the bottom line. And therefore, organizations which are usually struggling with profitability, struggling with financial independence and all that, efficiency of service makes a huge impact on what they do and how they do it, and with what little resources they're able to do. So all these factors are very important, and from STARS Forum, we'll be happy to sort of see how we can engage using our forum members to explore service design opportunities in the work that they're currently doing, and also take service design into vernacular regions, because many times organizations may still think of this as the urban thing or the corporate thing or and stuff like that, and we need to try and localize and make it more accessible and make it more relatable to organizations who don't have the same degree of exposure to these concepts.
Correct. Yeah. So, Chaitanya sir, I would like to request you to briefly talk about what the STARS Forum is about, so that people will be aware that what type of activities we do at the STARS Forum.
Sure. So as the name says, it's a forum, and the idea behind creating the forum was to bring together people and organizations who are spread out in this country. STARS was set up about 11 years ago, and STARS is an acronym for Skills Training for Advancement in Rural Societies. As the name says, it focuses on improving the skills, improving the ability of our rural societies to look after themselves, to enhance their skills, to make themselves more effective in the kind of changing scenarios that they all live in, that we all live in. The idea behind the forum was that if you look at the urban pockets, there are not too many urban pockets, large urban this thing. You have the Mumbai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune, Delhi, blah, blah, whatever. But see, even today, most of our population lives outside this, number one. Second thing is their skill requirements, their educational requirements, their vocational requirements are not entirely well developed either. And so what we are trying to do is to look at all the best practices that have happened across this country, what are the innovations that are happening across this country, so that we can help and bring some collaboration on the table. So that's one. So for networking, collaboration is, we try to facilitate that. The third thing that we do is to bring in advances like what you all are talking about. Bring in advances that are available to such organizations, so that they have direct access to experts, and they can use some of this expertise in the work that they do, therefore become better and more effective in their work. So that's the broad sort of the objective and the mission.
Yeah, thank you, Chaitanya. So on this request, we are planning to have a service design session in Marathi and Hindi in coming month. So where we don't want to limit this knowledge only to the people who understand English, but I think we have to break the barrier of language and take it to the next level. So we are planning to have a one session in Marathi and one session in Hindi in coming month. Please stay tuned to this, and we will inform you the dates about this session very soon. Please pass on this information to your friends, as well as the different volunteers and the different NGOs who are really working in the deep pockets of rural India. I think we can see. So we are starting with Marathi and Hindi. So depending on the availability of other volunteers, as well as the request, we'll plan it in the other languages also very soon, because we want to really go span India and really pass on this information, because at SDS India, we want to democratize the service design knowledge instead of keeping it in the hands of few people. We really want to democratize this, and for that we all are working together while one is the awareness session, but also really coming up with the methodology which is very easy to understand for everybody, so that they can start using it in their day-to-day life. So with this, I would like to conclude today's session. Thanks a lot all the speakers, as well as for all the participants. Really thankful to all of you, and looking forward to again connect with all of you in subsequent sessions. And also to the volunteers who have already joined these two projects, will be starting our project planning and the execution from tomorrow. So we'll get in touch with you tomorrow for the detailed discussions and the execution on these two projects. So thank you. Thanks a lot, and good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.